Morning, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to a very important edition of Breaking News for this Friday, the 17th day of January, 2025. Here is the latest. The ceasefire hostage deal was signed by both Hamas and Israel last night, that is Thursday. The Security Cabinet has just voted today, Friday, to recommend the government approve the hostage deal. If all goes according to plan, the first hostages will then be released on Sunday night. Now we can sum up the situation as follows. Headline number one, 33 hostages will be released in 6 weeks, women and children first. These are the details of the deal. This is from YNET, an Israeli website. At least three hostages will be released each week during the 42-day ceasefire as the IDF gradually withdraws from central Gaza and displaced persons return to the north. For each kidnapped civilian, 30 terrorists will be released, and for each female soldier, 50. Now, here's the key. Negotiations on the second phase of the agreement, guaranteed by the U.S., Qatar, and Egypt, will begin by the 16th day of the first phase. The second phase is expected to include the release of all remaining hostages, including soldiers, and to ensure, and here's the key, a permanent ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and a full IDF withdrawal from it. The third phase is expected to include the return of all remaining hostages and the beginning of the reconstruction of Gaza under the supervision of Egypt, Qatar, and the UN. The second phase is where the controversy stems, of course, namely a permanent ceasefire and a complete withdrawal of all the Israeli soldiers in the Gaza Strip. And this seems to be incredible that they would do something like this. Well, let's keep reading. Headline number two, thousands protest against ceasefire deal in Jerusalem. This is from the Israel National News. Thousands of Israelis demonstrated in Jerusalem this evening, that was Thursday evening, last evening, against the ceasefire deal. The protest was led by the Tikva Forum, an organization of families of hostages held in Gaza, and by the Gevurah Forum of bereaved families. That's families who have lost soldiers in the fighting in Gaza. During the rally, participants called on the government, don't abandon the hostages, don't abandon Israel's security. Savika Moore, the chairman of the Tikva Forum, said, I call on the prime minister and all the right-wing ministers now. Time is running out. Don't give in to a deal that abandons most of the hostages. The choice you are making today is giving the hostages who are left behind a death sentence. Well, this is the view that's held by many Israelis, yet now it is a done deal, which leads us to headline number three. Likud, that's Netanyahu's party, of course, defends the deal, and it says it allows Israel to return to fighting under an American guarantee. This is from YNET News. It's the first time the party, that is the Likud, has published an official statement on the deal. Claims it will allow Israel to maintain full control of the Philadelphia corridor and the security buffer that surrounds the entire Gaza Strip. The Likud party issued a statement Thursday evening in which it stated the existing deal allows Israel to return to fighting under American guarantee. The first time any official has addressed this after a series of references attributed to a quote unquote political figure. Now, this is confirmed by another headline. Top Trump official says the U.S. will back renewed Israeli offensive in Gaza if needed. All right, so contrary to the Joe Biden plan, if something fails after the first phase, first 6 weeks, Israel will be allowed to resume fighting. Joe Biden's plan said no, they cannot. Donald Trump says yes, they can. So this is important to realize. Now, we're going to have two articles that are very, very important, one for and one against the hostage deal. And we'll list the links here. And we encourage you to read these in full. We're just giving you snippets of each one, but you'll get the gist of it because there's obviously two opposing views. Those that think the hostage deal is horrible, terrible for Israel, and those who think it's a good deal for a variety of reasons. So let's look at the arguments, pro and con. The first headline, Oh Bibi, Oh Trump, from total victory to a surrender. This is from Israel Hayom website by Ariel Kahana. And here's how it goes. The sole reason Netanyahu signed the deal was Trump. In America, on the eve of his inauguration, where it feels as if the entire world is bowing to the new old president, it's clear why Israel took this step. Yet it is still unacceptable that the promise of total victory ends as an embarrassing surrender deal. Then the author says what we were promised. And he goes through Netanyahu's promises in the past. 2009, Netanyahu said, we will topple Hamas. 2014, after Operation Protective Edge, Hamas has suffered a serious blow and will continue to suffer. In 2023, before October 7th, before the massacre that took place, Hamas is deterred. It will not fire into our territory. That statement from Netanyahu. And then in 2024, Hamas will no longer rule the Gaza Strip. And also in 2024, Netanyahu said, we will not stop until achieving total victory. All right, that's what was promised. What did we get? Well, the author lists that. Number one, a one-day massacre in sovereign Israel featuring atrocities of unprecedented horror. The longest and most grueling war in the country's history, claiming approximately 1,800 Israeli lives. 15 harrowing months with none of Israelis' stated objectives fully achieved. Approximately 250 hostages, some of whom have returned, while others remain unaccounted for, with their fates potentially never to be known. A bad ceasefire agreement leaves Hamas intact as a military and civilian force, allowing it to continue its rule over Gaza in one form or another. Netanyahu agreed to concessions that could enable Hamas to rebuild. He waived screening for the Gazans returning to northern Gaza, effectively allowing Hamas to regroup at areas stained with Israeli soldiers' blood over the past year. Netanyahu also likely agreed to a more extensive withdrawals of Israeli forces from major enclaves like Netzarim and the Philadelphia corridor. Yet, at a time when Trump's reentry to the White House should have bolstered Israel's position, the opposite has occurred. Now, this basically sums up the case against the hostage ceasefire deal. In other words, it's a very bad deal. Many Israelis hold this perspective. Netanyahu has bowed to Trump. He's capitulated, and it's just terrible all the way around. All these soldiers died in vain, nothing gained. Hamas is shouting and screaming victory, as is the rest of the Islamic world. And however, here we go to headline 5. There is another view. With hostage deal, Netanyahu is going all in on Trump. This is from the Times of Israel, January 16th. Aviv Reta Gur is the author. And I want you to pay close attention to what he says. The prime minister is risking a schism with his closest political allies to advance a deal with Hamas. He has good reason to think it's worth the gamble. Why would he be committing to a deal that has so many political risks for him? The deal now on the table is not, despite Biden's claim, the same deal offered in May. Key Israeli demands that Hamas refused in the spring have now been met, including the rate of hostage release and the significant Israeli presence in Philadelphia in phase 1. Enter Donald Trump. There are two deals on the table: Netanyahu's deal with Hamas and Netanyahu's deal with the incoming Trump administration. We know a great deal about the first and very little about the second. And here's the key. Could Netanyahu be channeling a solemn commitment from Trump when he promises a resumption of the war after phase 1? Israel can do what it takes to win, but Trump, it appears, wants it to show it is willing to try a ceasefire publicly and clearly. When Hamas inevitably tries to rearm or launch a rocket, Israel will have his excuse to return to fighting, perhaps better prepared with better intelligence penetration of the Hamas ranks than on October 8, 2023. And in the meantime, it will have handed Trump his political win in the form of a ceasefire and won his backing for a more intense fight against Hamas. If that's the basic dynamic, it explains much of Netanyahu's actions over the past 2 weeks. It explains why Netanyahu is standing up to far-right resistance. Smotrich and Ben-Gvir's public anger serves to highlight the conciliatory stance Netanyahu wants to project to the incoming Trump administration. In the meantime, Israel will work ferociously to build out the kind of intelligence infiltration in Gaza that it possessed in Lebanon. It will spend the ceasefire preparing the offensive Netanyahu seems to believe will be permitted him at the end of phase 1. In other words, the end of the 6 weeks ceasefire. If this is indeed Netanyahu's calculation, then the deal he will soon sign, he's now signed it, is a reasonable gambit and a serious strategy. So that's another point of view. Now, after looking at the two and thinking about it, because I've been reading all day, yesterday, today, day before, pros and cons. This explanation here seems to me makes a lot more sense. Netanyahu is not going to give up his goal of the eradication of Hamas and its military structure. In other words, he's not going to give in to Biden's ceasefire and leave deal, but rather to a deal where there will be a ceasefire. Some hostages will indeed be released, and when Hamas violates the deal, as we know they will, he will have the backing of the U.S. and Trump to use all the force necessary to defeat Hamas in the manner that he's always wanted to do. Therefore, while it looks like Netanyahu is capitulating, as I was told yesterday by someone who was in the know, it's never what we think. He said, Don, just be patient. All right, let's see how all of this plays out. It's fascinating and so much to see in the future. Keep praying, and we'll give you the latest as these events occur. So I'm Don Stewart again. Thanks for watching. And until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.